This is the future, and I'm really proud to have you all up here to share how this growing group of upstream and midstream producers and players are determined to change the way the narrative around mining. So Thiago, if you could kick it up for us. You're a top 10 company in the sector. You had your market share. You didn't need to, but you're taking a new path for sustainability and community. Why and how?
That's nice. Thanks a lot, Kanika. It's a pleasure to be here. In our case, we do that because we really believe that adds values both to the company and for the society, for the community as a whole. And it's very easy to explain and show some examples of what we did. Itaminas is a 67-year-old company, and it went on acquisition last year when I stepped in for the first time. And on the second week I was there, I just got a letter from the justice, a welcome letter, I say, saying that I should close Itaminas for not accomplishing some environmental obligations. So it was very welcome starting like that. But the thing is that Itaminas was going through its environmental license. I remember that André Esteves, during his panel, he mentioned that licensing for habitation, for example, here in housing here, 1 year. It takes 1 year. There, Itaminas was revalidating its license, not a new license. For the past 8 years, in mining, it costs a lot. Now, there's not only the cost of capital, but when you're going to take your money back from the investment. So when we stepped in, we start changing everything with our environmental and social agenda. And in 7 months, we could have the environmental license. So that adds a lot of value for us, and also for the society, for accomplishing those goals. But I think the most remarkable thing that we have is that we are just on the other side of Córrego do Feijão, where we have the dam break in 2019. The tailing dam collapsed and killed 272 people there. And when we first had a meeting with the Victims Association, telling them that we would assume a mining just in the surrounds there, the meeting starts like that. The president of the Victims Association, he showed her cell phone and said, "This is Priscilla, my daughter. She worked for the company for the past 10 years. I called the authorities for 20 days in a row to have some information of my family. And in the 20th day, they called me there and they delivered my daughter in a box with a leg, an arm, and the chest, and I never found her head. So I'm very happy for you to coming back here and say that you're going to have your operations back." So we start talking with all the communities, and it was in February that happened. And in July, we started operations, the new operations, and in September, he asked us, and her daughter started working with us. And she called me and said, I would like her to work with you because you do differently. And I lost my daughter on one side of the mine, and I'm giving another daughter for you to take care of. So how does it add value to the company? Because if they were kind of fighting against, we probably haven't started yet, and we will be losing money. So that adds value for us, and that adds values for them, because they have more jobs, for example, the wages are higher, and things like that. So that really adds value. In fact, it's not a matter if I like ESG or not. It just adds values.
Marcelo, Sigma Lithium has been recognized for environmentally sustainable production. Run us through what motivated this, and what are some key factors, if you could list, that you think helped get Sigma Lithium to where it is today?
Sure. Okay, so first of all, Kanika and Milken Institute, thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be with you. So we deployed long-term capital into this sector back in 2016. That was right after we had a very sad environmental disaster in Brazil. So back then, we wanted to demonstrate that sustainability, social impact, and cost leadership can coexist. There's no miracle. It does require higher capital investment at a time when capital is scarce. And it also requires higher ongoing expenses. So there's no shortcut. But it's still, we proved, our company became operational in 2023, and I'm very happy to say that it's been recognized worldwide, as an example in sustainability and social impact. And I'm also very happy that we believe that we've been helping a little bit Brazil to showcase what it's possible to get done here in Brazil, right? When you mention, what are the main factors that put us in this position? So the first one I would say is the innovation that we put in place in what we call our green tech industrial plant. Once again, it does require a higher capital investments, right? But it put us in position to run an operation that is within one of the lowest cost operations in the whole world. As some examples of innovations that we put in place, that industrial plant does not have any tailings dams. We don't use any hazardous chemicals. We don't use potable waters. It's a zero waste operation. Secondly, I want to highlight the fact that the operation is in Brazil. It helps tremendously to be in Brazil. And why is that? First of all, Brazil have an established mining jurisdiction. You have rule of law. Third, circa 90% of our energy matrix is renewables. Our green tech plan is green tech among several factors. One of them is that it's powered by renewable energy, right? And lastly, it has all the infrastructure in place that is needed, a much better infrastructure than in several other jurisdictions. And I would say that these were the key ingredients.
Thank you. So I want to pick up on something you said, made in Brazil. Andre, China's low-cost practices have dominated the nickel markets. You are applying a key technology here in Brazil. Share with us how game-changing that could be.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I think today, what we're trying to do with nickel, it hasn't been done before at that scale. We are applying a very old technique, which is heap leaching, which is common in gold, it's common in copper, to nickel. And that's very low cost from an energy perspective, and also from a carbon perspective, it's very lower, which is in a complete different from what the supply chain in China and Indonesia looks like, right? So that's the first point. We're trying to diversify the supply chain by proposing something strategically different, which is let's produce nickel at a competitive cost, but being very responsible from an ESG perspective, low carbon and working with the community. So that's how we're positioning strategically our business. And that's how I think we are diversifying away from what's happening today in Southeast Asia.
Thank you. So one of the things that's come across even in this conversation so far is high costs, excessive price volatility in the commodity markets, but yet the need to stay responsible and how you're continuing to pursue the innovation to lower your environmental and social impact and work with communities, which brings me to the financing side. So Luciana, can you share with us in the room where we are on the Critical Minerals Fund and how you see engagement, whether it's BNDES or your partners, in financing this journey that will help position Brazil in what is a very strategic position right now in the global race for minerals?
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And Kanika, it's a pleasure to be here. I would like to thank.
It's not working.
Can you hear me? The microphone is not working.
Okay, we'll get it fixed. Oh, we have a backup. Okay. Okay, we'll get that fixed. We'll get that fixed in a minute.
It's okay? No?
No, okay.
Yeah.
We'll
I'll
co-
try. Can you hear me? No?
Okay, we'll come back while they fix that. Hold that thought. Thank you. Let's continue with this because we don't have much time, and I want to make sure we talk about how international capital and, okay, so we'll come back. I want to talk about dampening the volatility, and in an industry where we need more patient capital, given an average mine takes north of a decade to come online. How are you seeing, this is no longer also a private sector solution. Governments from all over the world are getting involved. They don't have the minerals. So I'd like to turn to you guys and ask you guys, how are you seeing international cross-border efforts? What form is public capital taking, and how are your companies fitting in? If I could start with you, Andre.
Of course. As Andre said earlier today, we're moving from a multilateral world to a more national markets, and that's forced most of the governments to step in and try to rebuild their supply chains in accordance with their national interests, right? So, and that's where the governments play a pivotal role in securing that those projects, especially our projects in the critical minerals, get developed. So what we see today in our project is that several governments from the Western world, including BNDES, including the Brazilian government, are trying as much as they can to support our projects, either through project finance or even through equity when they find a mechanism that works with their regulatory framework. I think the challenge today are two. One is the long-term nature of the investments. They need to be patient. And second is the regulatory framework, where it needs to be adapted to this new reality, geopolitical reality, where they now need to deal with supply chain, which wasn't a problem before. So I think those challenges are being addressed to a certain length by different governments at different speeds. But they're doing something. That's
Yeah.
what's important.
Right. And using ESG as an asset class almost for all of you. Thiago, could you talk to that? I know you have some thoughts on how industry should be positioned.
Yeah, sure. I think so. I think both on ESG and also in addition to what Andres just said in the previous panel here, Isabel from Barclays mentioned that they don't fund food and ag. They fund food security and price stability. So we need, from our standpoint, from the company standpoint, that we are playing a game, a global game or a regional game. As Marcelo mentioned, in the national level, for example, for us, we were reached out by Mubadala and also from Saudi PIF, because our strategy is related to the decarbonization agenda, which brings the sustainability in a global way. But also, as the steel industry is moving to Europe, due to CBAMs in Europe especially, and they are looking for a net zero steel or a green steel, and they need ore, and even for the energy transition they also need ore. And we need to know that we are not only, it's not only our business and looking for funding that the banks give you money, then you pay it back, or the investor, but also talking to those sovereign funds, example, helps to address the volatility, because they are not looking just for the business itself, but as the supply chain as a whole. So even when you have the volatility, if you are adding value to the supply chain, in their words, say, your project really adds value to the country, so we'd like to support you on equity and on funding. And I remember telling them that I don't like equity or funding, I want a partner, because if you don't have the equity for me, as a partner, we can open dialogue with any financial institution. So the country and the funders, if you're not a sovereign fund, but like BNDES or even DFC, they need to look as those sovereign funds in terms of the value chain. And we here, as the C-level of the company, or even the owners or the shareholders, whatever it is, we need to look that we are playing this global game and how we add value on that. If we connect that, then we can discuss volatility, the risks, the funding in the long run.
That's an excellent way. Marcelo, we talked about the global hunt for minerals, and run us through how your company is managing the short-term versus long-term capital, working capital to keep on the green projects versus the offtake agreements.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so to start with, I think I'm in the best position to talk about volatility. You know, like our sector has been marked by cycles, by like 2 to 3 year cycles, where prices have gone up to circa 20 times, to prices going down up to 90%, right? So tell me about volatility. Firstly, like it helps, obviously, that our company has been backed by long-term capital since day one. Second, I would highlight that, you know, like we don't lower our standards. You know, like, this is an issue in some parts of the world, and this is something that, you know, we reject completely. And third, it's essential to be low cost when you run such a when you are in such a volatile sector, right? So I would say that like when you combine the fact of being low cost, plus in addition to that like traceability and sustainability, and the fact that you are in Brazil, you know, like where like, you know, like we trade with the whole world, that puts us in a position where we are like the partner of choice of end users worldwide, in the East, in the West, in the Middle East, right? And therefore, like such end users, they want to work with such reliable suppliers. So like in our case, something that we've been doing like recently is that we've been replacing, you know, like our working capital financing from banks, from financial institutions to our clients. And an additional benefit for us is that, like, one, we get like even closer to those clients, and we get, you know, like a lower cost of funding than we would have like otherwise if we were still dealing with banks.
That's very helpful. Luciana, I think your mic's working now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay, okay.
Good
The floor is
afternoon.
yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Kanika and Milken Institute, greet my colleagues, and it's a pleasure to be here. When it comes to financing or capital raising on the equity side, I agree that this industry, the mining industry, is very specific. BNDES has a deep knowledge of project finance in infrastructure and energy, and we are putting in place mechanisms to also support the mining industry. One innovation that the bank has done is the Critical Mineral Fund, where BNDES is putting 25%, Vale is putting 25%. We hire GPs to raise the remaining. So it's going to be a R$1 billion fund to support mid-sized companies in early stage. Because for those guys, for those specific segment, and in this stage, we need equity. There's no financing space for that. When it comes to project finance, the mining industry carries specific risks that have been appointed here, which is related to volatility, price volatility, and also the companies, they must be low cost, in which point of the cash cost curve those companies are placed, because indeed critical minerals are very volatile. But this is the challenge that we have to address. But on the other hand, Brazil, depending on which statistics we see, alongside with China, Australia, Canada, Brazil is very well positioned in terms of reserves. We have pretty much, depending on which source we look, 10% of the critical mineral reserves, and we explore less than 1% of that. So there's huge room to grow. We have critical minerals, and we have cheap renewable energy. to process those critical minerals like Marcelo just mentioned. We have a tradition, we have a mining industry which is secular, we have best practices. The companies here are an example of that because we do mining with social responsibility and because of our renewable matrix, we also are very low carbon. So I think that the Critical Mineral Fund is just the first instrument that we are putting in place, but a lot of innovation will come in the near future.
Can I add something on the volatility?
Yes,
side?
please.
I think the key to one of the key pillars of dealing with that volatility is innovation, right? We need, and we are doing this, we're moving from an old technology in terms of how we explore the mines into trying new ways to do it. And that's how I think we're positioning ourselves at Brazilian Nickel. When we move away from HPAL and we're trying something new, which is heap leaching at atmospheric pressure, we are trying to do that, of course, for ESG reasons, but also from a volatility perspective, because that puts our direct cash costs at around the first quartile, around $7,000 per ton. Of course, there are challenges. It's innovation, it's new technology, but I think we as miners, we should always reflect, not only try to solve the volatility problem within the market itself, but within the company. And that's done through innovation. That's, I think, it's a thing that the mining sector is trying to deal with to a certain extent.
Let's innovate on contract. I mean, we need to work better on prepayment agreements and
Exactly.
off-take agreements, like Marcelo is saying. Sometimes prepayment agreements, prepayment instruments are great instruments to finance. Innovate on off-take agreements is also important. This new world is the low carbon, the world which is neutral in carbon is intensive in materials. So, and we need to innovate on contracts and financial
Correct.
instruments.
Perfect.
Can I ask on this, on innovating, right? So innovations in mining, they reduce exploration costs, they reduce exploration time, they reduce worker safety risks, they can improve yields downstream. So sometimes you hear this frustration that things like AI have gotten adopted so fast in other sectors, and but yet there's, in mining, it's coming from large names. There's concerns that if they take innovation on board, to your point, Andre, even one slight hiccup can cost millions of dollars, right? So, but having said that, all three of you are continuing to pursue innovations. I'm very curious, in this now global world where there are countries that really need these minerals, that want to maybe fund you and do not want to get involved when they wake up in the morning and see a bad headline, right, on an environmental risk. So that has to be a huge pitch for you as well. And I'm just curious on how the persistent efforts that all three of you are making in pursuing innovation and social sustainability, how is that getting traction overseas? Are you finding certain countries are more receptive to it? Are they seeking you out? What is the form of financing? What does the new international capital landscape look like to all three of you? Maybe Andre, if you could start and go to Thiago and then Marcelo.
Okay. For us, it has been welcomed by the Western world, mostly. I think Europe through France and through Germany mainly have pushed initiatives through the private sector via the government, and we have memorandums and MOUs with one German company, which is Pure Battery Technologies, and one which is a French company called M, where they're securing offtake. We have the problem with the price still, but they're securing volume, and on terms that we are not used to, 10 years plus, which is something that's not very common in this market, right? And you see that there's a movement, and there are refineries. They're taking our product, which is midstream, and make it downstream. So you see that there's nothing common, but we are not living in common times, right? Things are changing fast. So the Western world is trying to find itself ways to do it. The Americas Most Canada and the US also put LOIs for us to do the project finance. DFC with $500 million, EDC with 275, and this is public. So I'm not saying anything here that's confidential. So everyone is trying to find a way to secure the supply chain upstream and downstream. So I think that's very good news for the Western world and for us critical minerals as a project.
Gianna?
I agree. I think there is a very huge gap in a very high asymmetry of information in mining, because we see like mineral projects and people probably come to Marcelo all the time, and for Andre, I'm pretty sure, Marcelo, I'm totally sure, and come to us and said, I have a huge, nice project, I have done the drilling campaign, it has ore with high grade, you want to invest on that, and we try to be as transparent as possible when we reach financial institutions. In our case, you have like a KfW, likewise, just talking about sustainability and try to get a lower interest rate and being transparent, because they simply don't know what happens, for example, in rare earths, that was also mentioned before, projects that come to us and say, this is not a good project because there is traditional communities there, they haven't been heard under Brazilian law, which is not regulated, and it's not going to work it's not going to run in the medium term, not in the long run. And being transparent with them adds value to us likewise, because you say, don't do that. For example, in our case in Taminas, we don't suggest to make a partnership or trying to sell some stakes, because even though we are transparent, we accomplish all the environmental obligations, you don't know what's going to happen in the future, and we want to keep our reputation. So we are always trying to fundraise, but keeping the funds, the investors safe as well, in a structure of the funding that they can be secure and reduce their risks, and that can turn into lower interest rates or lower spreads.
Yeah, well, on our case, okay, we've been transacting with actors and players all over the world. I would say that like a next step where we can all improve is if we have like a more established traceability framework, which is aligned with the OECD and the EU Battery Passport for critical materials. I think this is like the next step that we make for producers, like in Brazil, like even easier to show like our standards compared to other parts of the world.
Luciana, just picking up something that Marcelo said, right? There is a fiscal constraint on Brazil, right? But to your point, you've talked about, you were talking earlier today, you talked about there are potential paths that Brazil could go down on financing and providing greater support. So would love to hear from you.
One experience, talking about, yes, there is fiscal constraint in our country, but Brazil, BNDES manages the climate fund. And climate fund is a catalytic debt for energy transition and carbon. And critical minerals are eligible for the climate fund. One thing that could add to this, to innovation when it comes to financing this critical mineral, the mining industry, would be, for example, a guarantee fund to support those companies to access climate fund. But if we are to create a guarantee fund, we would need fiscal budget for that, and we don't have. One thing that we could suggest is a cooperation with multilaterals and in the US, in Europe, because we have the catalytic debt through climate fund. We have companies willing to access that fund. Maybe we could figure out a guarantee fund with other multilaterals to support those initiatives. So this could be a path to pursue, in my opinion.
Incredible. I love that. So, something that we've seen coming out of the United States is the concept of how important public announcements can be as a signaling effect, whether it's putting a price floor on a mineral or whether it's providing an offtake agreement, right? So something along. Yeah.
Yes. Like, I think those are also paths to pursue, because mining finance is different from project finance of infrastructure. Yeah. I mean, project finance of infrastructure, we are talking about concessions, we are talking about a lower risk, we don't have this price volatility risk, so those are separate topics. But that's why offtake agreements are very important, and I think that as the trade increase in the Western, as the more the US and Europe, they need critical minerals for Brazil, I think that the private sector will move to improve those offtake agreements. And when it comes to offtake agreements, devils relies on the details. So those offtake agreements could really be used to unlock project finance structures. Prepayment facilities are also a way to pursue. Cooperation between BNDES and multilaterals is also a way to pursue. At BNDES, we also are the secretariat of the Brazilian Country Platform, and critical minerals is a vertical of that country platforms. And the country platform, it's the right environment to unlock more innovation on the financial side and reduce risk along the value chain. So I see a lot of opportunities. There is risk, there are challenges there, but as we follow President Lula, he's really aware of the critical minerals opportunities that Brazil carries, and he's also aware that we have cheap renewable energy. So it's a way also for Brazil to go further in the value chain, and instead of just exporting pure commodity, we can integrate the supply chain more in Brazil depending on the way we position ourselves. And I think there is a win-win between Brazil, Europe, Brazil, the US, so I'm optimistic about the future of this industry. The Minister of Energy and Mining, they recreate the Council of Mineral Policy, which is a signal that the country is also willing to put an effort to improve the regulatory frameworks on mineral, because this new world will require private money, but with public money and public policy driving investments to where investments need to go and reducing risks.
Well said. We have under 4 minutes left, so I would like to turn to my other three speakers. Closing remarks. One thing you want to leave the room with. Tiago, we'll start with you.
The mining sector created a very bad reputation in the recent years, especially because of the tailing dam breaks, but also because when you look from above, if you get Google Maps, you see some roads, but you don't take in consideration that all the preserved area is preserved by mining companies. So mining preserves 10 times the area that they explore. There in Minas Gerais, some places where you have mining, the GPD per capita is twice as cities with no mining company. So mining is good. Everything here in this place in the world was planted or mined. So we have to change the way people see mining. The development depends on mining. So it's also important for us to play this international role, but also look for sustainability. But it's very important for us to take the storytelling for us and starting saying that producing nickel is important for the development of the world, the lithium as well. Iron ore, rare earths, everything. So we must change that. People must understand there is no life without mining.
Andre.
I would say that this current world that we live in cannot live without critical minerals. On the other hand, we have a responsibility to make and to do things different from what our old mining would to do. So sustainability is non-negotiable. And at last, I think the Brazilian government is doing what it can. And there is this strategic critical minerals policy that's in Congress now to be approved, which will push the regulatory framework. So I think we have everything, we have the right momentum coming together for us to unleash the potential of this country, not only on iron ore, which is established, but into critical minerals and having a more protagonist role in the world in that sense, in this renewable energy, in this changing world towards a more greener and sustainable environment.
Marcelo, you have the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, there is no energy transition without critical minerals, full stop. And I am 100% sure that Brazil has a historic opportunity to become the world's most trusted, sustainable, low-carbon supplier of battery materials, full stop.
This is a country of rule of law, a lot of natural resources, low-cost renewable energy, and also we have infrastructure and we are improving the infrastructure. I mean, Brazil has huge investments flowing into roads, toll roads. We are trying to put in place regulatory frameworks for railway because critical minerals is also about infrastructure. So I think there is huge challenges ahead, but Europe and the Western can do cooperate with the country because here we are a country where investors really trust on the rule of law.
Amazing. So before we close, first of all, thank you for joining us for this, and thank you to my amazing speakers. And we will be continuing the conversation on critical minerals at our Middle East and Africa Summit in Abu Dhabi. We hope to have the CEOs of DFC and Ma'aden and Orion on stage. So if you're around, join us for that. But otherwise, thank you so much for sharing the new world of mining. Thank you.